Okay, a little video again in relation to, as promised, the cyclist killed woman, illegal racing bike, detained judge says. Anyway, it's in relation to this chap, Charlie Alliston. He's been sent to the Old Bailey for his sentencing hearing. So I think it's pretty much been found guilty. So we'll talk about this one. Right, so the cyclist who killed woman on a legal racing bike is detained as judge says he was an accident waiting to happen. Okay, he's an accident waiting to happen. So he's took it upon himself to obviously ride a bicycle through a busy town of London. And unfortunately, in the thrill of racing on an Olympic velodrome bike, he's managed to crash into someone. So in this case is this woman here, Kim Briggs, and their heads collided apparently, and that's what caused the injury. As you can see, this is the bike. You can see how leaning, how high the bum is pushed up here, so you'll be leaning down into the racing position. Obviously for aerodynamics when you're in a sports arena, not ideal for public use. When you're out in the public, you have a duty of care to your fellow man just to make sure that you don't harm people. Yes, it may be confused as being overly safe, health and safety, but you're always liable for your actions. So by all means, go out and cycle on a bike like this, and by all means, cycle as fast as you can. But by no means hit or cause damage to anyone or anyone's property. Because if you do, you bear the liability, however great or small that liability may be. In this case, it's probably the greatest cost of all is that this poor woman, Kim Briggs, died, which is pretty tragic. And this is this is the chap who did this. We'll go through the article, and you'll start to develop a picture of how this newspaper report by the Telegraph. I don't know who the person who wrote it is. Telegraph reporters. Okay. So a former courier who knocked over and killed a mother of two while riding an illegal Olympic-style racing bike for the thrill has been detained for 18 months. So highlighted here was the thrill. We need to look at the words again. And it has been detained for 18 months. Detained. Now normally you're in prison or committed. So this whole detained is an interesting word. I presume that's some sort of legal term. Because you're either imprisoned, aren't you? I thought you're either put under arrest or you're imprisoned. Detained is an interesting one. Charlie Alliston, then 18, so he was of, is that technically adult age? I mean, he's a legal age to contract, but we'll come to that later because they've sent him to a young offender. He's going to start his sentence in a young offenders institution, which I thought was a bit interesting because I mean, if you're 18, I was always under the belief that you are an adult, but perhaps manhood is, as some people have alluded to before, starts around the age of 21. He was travelling at 18 miles an hour, possibly. That's a fair old sprint on a bike. He can go a lot faster though. On a fixed-wheel track bike with no front brakes before crashing into 44-year-old Kim Briggs as she crossed Old Street in East London. Now, I was going to just quickly see where Old Street was. Old Street. There's probably loads of old streets. Now, did he so happen to crash his bike in the City of London, or was he around the City of London? Let me have a look. How do I zoom out here? Let's go. Old Street. So this is Old Street. Okay. No, I don't know if that is the city. Ooh. You know what? He might have been right on the boundary. Where's the Liverpool Street Station? That's just a square mile. Let's do the City of London. City of London. So he was on Old Street. Old Street's up here. So he was outside the City of London. Old Street, East London. Postcode's E something around here. Normally they tell you the postcodes. Sometimes they don't. So as you can see, this is the City of London, this red line. That's often referred to as the square mile. Now, a lot of people may not know this, but the City of London is like a Monaco of England. You know, like France has Monaco; it's a separate principality. You might also know that Italy has Venice, and God knows there's probably other independent city-states out there in the wide world, but they're probably the most. And I think the Vatican might be another way of saying it. The Vatican is like its own city-state, if you like, within Italy, within Rome, the city of Rome, and then you have Vatican. So London is essentially that. It is surrounded by London, as in the London town, but the city itself, the city of London, is surrounded by London, the town of London. But remember, you got the city of Westminster, you got Southwark here, and I believe there's Southwark, there's something else. I can't remember. Whitechapel. So anyway, it's not, a lot of people refer to this as London, and yes, it is often referred to as London, but as you can see by even Google, there is London and there is the City of London, and people just tend to think that they're one and the same. But in relation to this case, he was scooting down this road, it seems, Old Street, scooting down, and he's had his accident presumably along this road here, from what the newspaper report just said. So he is technically outside of the City of London. Why is that important? Let's keep going. In February last year, passing sentence, a judge. Now, they normally name the judge. A judge. Yeah, they normally say, District Judge Smith, for example, or if it's a District Judge Magistrates Court Smith. But in certain murder and manslaughter cases, as I once spoke to a court clerk who was seated while the judge had risen, I think is the term they use. I approached them, just asked them generally about murder trials, and they always say, it goes up to the Old Bailey. And I was a bit confused by it. I said, the Old Bailey, but that's in the City of London. And I said, following a trial at the Old Bailey, which is in the City of London, Alliston was cleared of manslaughter and found guilty of causing bodily harm by wanton and furious driving. Sentencing at the Old Bailey. Here we are. Judge Wendy Joseph, Queen's Counsel. I am satisfied in part it was this so-called thrill that motivated you to ride without a front brake, shouting and swearing at pedestrians to get out of the way. Interesting word. So, the crime was committed in England. Let's say I'm in Paris. Alright, I'm in Paris, I'm a tourist, my camera gets robbed. Alright, they find the robber and then they send him to Monaco. Bit strange. Or I'm in Italy, I'm in Rome. Again, I'm at the Colosseum doing sightseeing stuff. I get beaten up by a random thug. Alright, I go to the court. The court is not held in Rome, it's taken to the Vatican. Well, why would that happen? And this is basically what I highlighted to the court clerk when I was at the magistrates' building, speaking to her when the judge had risen, and her thing was that like serious crimes, like a lot of the terrorism cases and a lot of the murders, or in this case they tried manslaughter but failed. They go to the City of London. I just said to her, but that's a separate entity, if you like. It's a separate jurisdiction. I mean, even you may have even heard that the Queen has to ask permission to enter the City of London. That's probably the most famous example of it being a separate jurisdiction. So it's very odd that we send our most serious criminals to a separate jurisdiction to be tried. And I've actually been to the Old Bailey, and if we go down here, there's a little picture outside. This is the husband. There's a very kind of low, claustrophobic outside exterior to the City of London. And just around the corner to the left here, there's the City of London Corporation door, I believe. And it's all very interesting. But I went in there and there's a terrorist case going on. And there was about, it must have been about 12, wig-wearing, I presume barristers. I mean, I have no idea what they were doing. I presume they're all barristers or legal types. Probably members of the bar. There was about 12 of those, and there was about maybe 3 judges seated. And I was thinking, holy crap! And they were obviously speaking to people taking aid, talking about people taking aid to Syria, and like cornflakes and toilet rolls were being mentioned. I was like, this is a lot of people to talk about toilet rolls and cereal boxes going off to another country, and then these people come back and they're all having to like say that they're not involved with terrorism, and yet they're trying to say that they are involved in terrorism. And I was just like, wow, this is really, really like expensive justice, if you like, for the public well-being or good. But anyway, so there we go. And I'm sure it's not cheap. I think the security guard at the door said it's something like, I think he said per second. It's like £90 a second or a minute or something ridiculous. Yeah, it was a ridiculous sum that he said how much it costs to have a case held here at the Old Bailey. But hey, if that's how it is, that's how it is, I guess. Somehow it's come to that. But anyway, so I do a crime in London, or this guy in particular has done an act of carelessness. I suppose that's pretty much how you could do it. And he's been careless, and he's presumed that people would get out of the way, and now he assumes the liability for that not exactly being as true as maybe he believed in his own mind. And now he's paying the price in the Old Bailey, of all places. So that's perhaps why it mentions things like detained instead of arrested, or imprisoned. I don't know if he's still got sentencing to do. Let's keep reading and find out. So yeah, so Alliston, which is Charlie here, Charlie Alliston, was cleared of manslaughter, but found guilty of causing bodily harm by wanton and furious driving. Bodily harm, that's really interesting, because I don't know. I know a police officer came to my school once and explained that there's GBH and ABH, and GBH is when blood essentially is broken on the skin, and ABH is when there is like bruising but no blood. Essentially, there's no cut, So or broken bones would be GBH, I presume. So, and ABH was, as she described it to me, was actual bodily harm, and GBH is grievous bodily harm. Okay, so here it's just causing bodily harm, whether it's grievous or actual. It's not mentioned, and then they've had to rely. This is what's caused a lot of interest in the media, is that they've had to rely on an 1860 something like that. 1861 offences against the Person Act, which we'll come to in a minute. So Offences Against the Person Act of 1861. They've had to rely on that in order to know what to do with this young man, which seems odd. But anyway, we'll come to that. But more manslaughter. Why did manslaughter fail? He was cleared of manslaughter. I found guilty of bodily harm, and the bodily harm obviously caused the death, presumably. But the manslaughter was not caused by bodily harm. Didn't cause the manslaughter, so they couldn't charge straight on the manslaughter. They've gone just for like you basically hurt someone in some way. You hurt the body. The body was harmed. And remember, the law is very simple about injury, harm, and loss. Remember, injury would be an accident, harm would be intentional, and loss. This is how I define it. And loss is obviously damages. Okay. And then you obviously have contract, but contract, there was no, there is a social contract, if you like, not to go out and cycle a bike in such a way that causes a death of someone. But by all means, if you wish to bear that liability, then do it, and pay the price for it. So here we've got harm. Harm is obviously some sort of intent: blood, guts, gore, evil doing. So yeah, I'm a bit confused how they can say bodily harm yes, manslaughter no. It's interesting. Maybe they dropped that themselves because they didn't have enough evidence from what they would consider a watertight case. So I decided then, hey, let's have a little look around. What is man? We all know what man is. It's not a person. Well, it is the person assigned to you by God, is essentially what man is. Okay, so you're a man. And then slaughter, okay? A crime. Now, a crime is a legal crime. Crime is an interesting one. I opened up a law book about crime, criminal law, And one of the first things I read that stuck out like a sore thumb is that crime and criminal is poorly defined even within a crime and criminal book. And they actually openly kind of confess this. We can't really define crime, but it's kind of this, kind of these. This is kind of the fuzzy area of crime. So if I said to you, imagine a tree, okay. If I said to you, imagine an apple, okay, okay, you got that. Now if I said, imagine a crime, maybe you don't get quite a picture. I mean, obviously killing someone's probably the most obvious form of a crime, but there are many types of crime, so it's a bit of a fuzz. Well, I can see an apple, I can see a tree, or if I said to you, imagine a car, all right? You can, we'll all have different colours of the car that we can think of, and different shapes and models, but essentially it'd be 4-wheel seats and a steering wheel and some sort of bodywork. But it's definitely not a van. If I said imagine a van, imagine a truck, now imagine a crime. And see, that's why it's a bit blurry when you're trying to get that in your head. And this is the same instance with the law books that are out there that try to define these things. And different countries, different societies, different cultures, and different colours of law will have different definitions of what a crime actually is. But here, manslaughter. So this is a Google. So this is as base definition as you could probably get. Okay, we'll go into some others in just a second. So the crime of killing a human being. I won't get started on that right now. Without malice. So that's like evil intent, or A for thought. So A being no, for prior thought. No prior thought. Or otherwise in circumstances is like, circumference. It goes around circumstances. Not amounting to murder. Okay. Then let's go to a site I like to use. Is the Free Dictionary. It uses it's like a combined source here. So we've got dictionary definitions, and then it goes on to legal dictionaries. Okay, so dictionaries. This is like pick up your standard dictionary and you have a look in it, and they give you some definition that's appropriate for plebs like us to get in a good idea of what they're talking about. The killing of a person without malice, A44, but with either the intention to commit an unlawful act. So now it's even saying there could have been intention to commit an unlawful act that leads to an unintended death, or with an otherwise murderous intent that is extenuated by some partial defence, such as acting under the influence of some extreme emotional disturbance. So manslaughter, I don't know, it's down here somewhere. It's like there's something about like sex deaths and like murder. I don't know, like people getting killed in sexy times. If you're having like some sort of sexual intercourse with someone and you tying them up and somehow they die in the heat of the moment, or the heat of passion, I think they refer to it all, which is very interesting. That obviously happens quite a lot for it to become some sort of manslaughter thing. The manslaughter here is a nice one. This is Collins English Dictionary. Law, brackets, law, the unlawful killing of one human being by another without malice or forethought, basically. So that's a nice simple one. That's something that you and I can understand and read and comprehend. And then loosely, killing a human being. So someone's died, and what they're really saying is manslaughter is without malice or intent. Bingo. Manslaughter here, the unlawful killing of a human being without malice or a forethought. Okay, let's relate that back to the cyclist guy. So he's gone out on a bike. He's cycled probably I'm Olympic. He probably was having a buzz. He was having a good time cycling that bike. Maybe it's something he doesn't get to do very often. I don't know. And so he's going as fast as he can and living the dream as a cyclist. So he hasn't. I don't think anyone can doubt that he's not. I mean, obviously it was dangerous what he did, but he never went out of the way to kill specifically this person for some particular reason, or this woman, should I say? For any, it was just wrong place, wrong time. And as the judge says, you were an accident waiting to happen. Couldn't put it. That's very, very nicely put. So then we go on to the legal definitions, and this is where it kind of, in your mind, you should start seeing that, bang, we turn those many little sentences into a great big wall of text. So the rabbit hole is deepening and getting darker and darker, if you like. And there's all kinds of the unjustifiable, the inexcusable, and intentional killing. So there's, you've got to prove all three of these points. Presumably, if you're using these words, you have to also look at the composition of these words. Inexcusable, intentional. It starts getting a bit Latin-y here. Of a human being without the deliberation, premeditation, malice. I think we all know. Malice, I think, is French. So this is all very much Latin and French kind of words, roots. The unlawful killing of a human being without deliberation, which may be involuntary in the commission of a lawful act without due caution or circumspection. Okay, so that I think some of that kind of rang true in my mind. Manslaughter is a distinct crime and is not considered a lesser degree of murder. So killing, it's not a lesser degree. So if you killed someone, you killed someone. So the crime of killing someone is pretty serious. But manslaughter is obviously in different circumstances, and it's obviously taken on a case-by-case basis as to what happens. So that this is where the judge and the jury would have to be presented with the facts, and they'd have to come to some reasoning about this. Yeah, it's not justified. So it's not a lesser crime. It's not as serious a crime as premeditated murder, because that's basically you're planning to kill someone because they've done you something wrong, done you some injustice or dishonor. On the other hand, it is not justifiable or excusable to killing for which little or no punishment is imposed. So you can't, we can't live in a world that people die and there's absolutely no punishment. This is kind of the strength of having a jury, okay? Whereas a jury will listen to you, like take a terrorist attack in Paris, England, or London, or anywhere, right? So if I was standing on a street and suddenly stuff goes down, and you're like in a position where you have a chair and the back of the terrorist is stabbing some, you're facing the back of a terrorist and he's just gone at someone with a knife, you could pick up that chair and whack that guy over the head because he's clearly acting unlawfully and harming your fellow man. Okay, now you whacked him on the head with the intent of disabling him, but let's just say you break his neck and he dies. Okay, now you would plead that to a case to it. Now clearly you've not intentionally murdered him, but you've intentionally caused harm to him, which has brought about his death. So yes, I would say that kind of sounds like manslaughter. And now let's take that to the jury, and you say, jury, look, if it probably wouldn't even get to court, but you might have to explain your actions, and the jury more than willingly, hopefully, God willing, would render a verdict that was just. And it'd be even great if you saved the lady's life or the man's life that was being stabbed at the time. I think that would be lovely to call in as a witness and say, look, if this guy hadn't have done what he's done, I would be I'd be dead. So bang, the jury would be like, oh God. That's the strength of the jury. It's the people kind of saying, you know what, in those circumstances he killed someone, that was wrong to kill someone, but in this case he did the right thing, and I can justify that, and you know what, I can't bring myself to commit this guy to prison for punishment. You understand? It's very based on your own moral standing. Now there might be people in the jury who says, look, death is death. He's got to do some sort of time in prison. But without a unanimous decision, it's not going to happen. So that's the strength of a jury. Okay, so it kind of lets people, if you're going to sentence someone for doing a wrongful act but in a right way, you got to live with your conscience about rendering that verdict as a jury member for the rest of your life. You can't spend the rest of your life saying, oh, I should have committed that guy to prison, or I should have let that guy go. You have to do that's all the realms of post-traumatic stress syndrome and like long-term depression, regret, remorse, and suffering your own ailments by giving the wrong decision, not being true to yourself, if you like. So being true to yourself means that probably the next day and even a week after, they might tell their friends and family about their jury case once it's been obviously resolved. But they'll be after that it's done and dusted, and you very rarely think back to that as if you've done a wrong. It's when you do something wrong it can stick in your head. So as a jury, it's very powerful to look at that. So in this case, again, bringing it back to the cyclist, if it was a jury, I don't know. Let's keep going through the article and see if it was just a judge or there was a jury. See how the Old Bailey operates. I'm satisfied in part that this was a so-called thrill that motivated you to ride without a front brake, shouting and swearing at pedestrians to get out your way. Shouting and swearing at pedestrians. Interesting. Yeah, it's lethal. It's very dangerous to be a pedestrian, is all I can say. I've heard your evidence, and I have no doubt, this is the judge speaking, obviously, that even now you remain obstinately, see, judges, they know exactly what words they're using. So, let's find out what that is. Latin, obstinatus. Resolute. There we are, resolute. Just say resolute. Stubborn. Oh, maybe even stubborn. Oh, I like that. Stand stubbornly, set in one's mind. Wow. See, it really opens up the meaning of what the judges are going on about, and it's a nice thing to do. Oh, where's the article? There I've been. So stubborn remains basically stubborn, sure of yourself and your own abilities. I have no doubt you are wrong in this. There we go. So she's basically giving them a little slight in relation to his state of mind. You were an accident waiting to happen. The victim could have been any pedestrian. It is, in fact, in this case, Mrs. Kim Briggs. The judge said Alliston's whole manner of driving caused the accident. Driving, interesting. See, this is tricky. This is. I've been through driving with Wayne Rooney. Okay, the whole manner of driving. I couldn't agree with that more. The whole manner of driving was very questionable. If your bicycle had a front wheel brake, you could have stopped. Well, speculation by the judge. But on this illegal bike, you could not. And on your evidence, your own words, testifying or speaking to yourself, to a court, by this stage, you were not even trying to slow or stop. You expected her to get out of the way. You expected her. I'm sure she expected you not to crash into her. All right. Great expectations. Alliston raised his eyebrows as the judge said his sentence would be custodial prison. In a series of posts on social media, Alliston described how he twice warned Miss Briggs to get the fuck out of the way. Okay. That's twice warned before you crash? That's so... Isn't it? Get out the way, crash. Interesting. And there's two schools of thought on that. You know, if you have said to someone, get out of the way, or make way, or make out of the effing way, you know, you are shouting. It's like beeping your horn, beep, 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 beep. You know, that's basically you are trying to communicate with your fellow man to warn them to get out of your way. Okay, because, you know, if you're in a car, let's say your brakes had failed, or for some reason you haven't fitted brakes on your car, then obviously it's not road legal. You go skimming down the road and you're beeping your horn, beep, 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 beep. Or let's say you did have brakes fitted and suddenly they failed to work. Okay, but in this case, obviously there weren't any. So there's a lot of like, yeah, okay, he's trying to warn her. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. And if she don't listen, maybe she's... The thing is, you've got to make so many presumptions here. What happens if she was deaf? You know, what happens if she was hard of hearing? You know, this is why there's this thing out in the public that you have to treat everyone as like an eggshell. You know, you can't presume that they're not frail and fragile little things. You have to presume that everyone is an egg. And, you know, any kind of contact with someone, touching them, anything like that, you have to presume that you could do them harm. Because you have no idea of that person's health. Okay, so she could have been deaf and he's shouting, get out the effing way. So, you know, it's your responsibility to obviously warn them, which is the right thing to do, maybe in a more courteous manner, as you're speaking to your fellow human being, if you like. But obviously in this case, he's gone smack bang wallop and she's not listened to his warnings. Now it's time for him to listen to his own warnings. And either jump off the bike or steer out the way or probably jump off. You've got to harm yourself before you harm someone else. He wrote, we collided pretty hard. So this is Charlie, is it? Charlie, let's call him Charlie. So this is Charlie speaking in court. We collided pretty hard. Our heads hit together. So his head hit someone else's head at around 18 miles an hour. So he's basically very lucky to be alive himself, I would say. Where is it? 18 miles an hour. Hers went into the floor and ricocheted into mine. He said, "It's not my fault people either think they are invincible or have zero respect for cyclists." Now, I'm going to just bring this bit up, think they're invincible, right? There is such a thing as, if people have a death wish, right? If people are walking around the streets drunk, not paying attention, and obviously wandering into roads, high as a kite. And I'm not saying that is obviously the case here, I'm just using it as an example. If someone is being silly or foolish, then you could argue the fact that they had a death wish. But I'm sure that's not the case in this instance, because this guy says that people think they're invincible, and that's a huge speculation to think that this woman thought she was invincible. I'm gonna walk out in front of a cyclist, or have zero respect for cyclists. Okay, again, another presumption that you believe that this woman had zero respect for cyclists and that she thought she was invincible. Interesting statement to make there. But in mitigation, his lawyer, so this is the lawyer now speaking on his behalf, QC, told the court, what we do not have is a callous young man who doesn't give a damn about anything. So he's actually saying we don't have a young man here who doesn't give a damn about anything. I would read that as we have something completely different. We don't, because he's saying he's not a young man who doesn't give a damn about anything. Interesting. He said that his client had suffered tragedy at the age of 16. This is where they start pulling the legal heartstrings. It's always like emotional fluff. It makes him sound good in court that he's trying to defend him, and it sounds all good. And he's putting in a good show as the defense counsel. This is all part of the magic show. He says that his client has suffered tragedy at the age of 16 when his father collapsed and died from a heart attack on the bathroom floor. So that's 2 years prior to him going out on a racing spree on his potentially hazardous bike to everyone in the public and causing an accident. But that was 2 years prior, and his dad collapsed and died of a heart attack in the bathroom floor just weeks before his GCSEs. I mean, okay, thanks for bringing that up. How does that... What was she responsible for the heart attack? Did she mess up potentially influence this guy's GCSEs? Yeah, thanks for that, barrister. Yeah. Referring to the pre-sentence report, Mr. Weith said there was a lot of vilification in this case in the manner he expressed himself in posts. Yeah, he's not. See, they're doing this thing again. I don't know if I highlighted this. I forgot to highlight this yesterday, where they do the speech marks, but they don't end the speech marks with the full stop, and yet they start the next sentence with the speech marks, and then they end it. Now, I'm obviously not the best at English grammar. Would this be? So, but I would have ended it there, or at least I would start the next sentence without these. That's how I would have done it. I wouldn't have these there, and then that would just stop there, and I would obviously presume that this is one big caption, if you like, or I'd end that one there and I'd start a new one here. But hey, I'm by the by. Perhaps you guys can enlighten me on that. I'm sure these journalistic people know what they're doing in terms of grammar. Right, so there's a lot of manner. So he's basically communicating like a pleb in the post. There is within him, I respectfully submit. Interesting. A lot of internal sense of emotional turmoil, but keeps this hidden as a coping strategy. Interesting. I mean, I've got nothing to say on that. That's an entirely interesting thing to say to court. The court heard Alliston was depressed, had broken up with his girlfriend. Oh, more sob stories here. So, my word. And lost his job. This is all stuff to actually, in a way, this is knocking off his standing as a man, okay? When people start sob-storying on your behalf, speaking for you as, oh, look at poor little guy. Oh, poor little guy. This is, and someone's speaking on your behalf to mention this. This is, there's something within him. It's, he's obviously trying to cope. Oh. Prosecutors took the unprecedented step of bringing a manslaughter charge due to the unusually grave circumstances of the case. Yeah. I don't know. Is this any different from hitting someone in a car? If you didn't, how many people get hit by cars every year? Oh, I didn't see him. I mean, that's what they say. Oh, I didn't see him. In this case, obviously, it's not a car; it's a bicycle. But essentially, you're in or in control of some sort of contraption, and you've hit someone and killed them. I mean, right, okay. The other offence of wanton and furious driving. This is the funny thing that's come along in relation to going all the way back to some Victorian law. And again, it doesn't really matter, dangerous driving or wanton and furious driving. I mean, presumably the Dangerous Driving Act doesn't mention anything to do with a bicycle. So this is why they've had to look for, oh God, we haven't got anything for this. This would be within the realms of legal or English common law. Okay, guys, it's very interesting that you need to know that English common law is not common law. Okay, it's this English legal society's common law. It's not the people's law, essentially. Offences against the Persons Act. So the Offences against the Person Act carries a maximum sentence of 2 years in jail. Mrs. Briggs, widower, this is Matthew now speaking from, it's obviously he was there. I mean, it must be nasty for him. I mean, she's just going about her business and she's dead from a cyclist. That's bizarro. From Lewisham, South London, has called for radical change in cycle culture. That's a nice thing to say about cycle culture. And the introduction of new laws. You see, the thing is, we don't need new laws. I mean, the English society have obviously maybe got a kind of a blind spot to this particular incident, including causing death by dangerous cycling. The thing is, the law, you can bring your own case, but the thing is, the case that he can bring at law, it's unlikely to involve a custodial prison sentence. Essentially, if someone's killed your wife, they owe you one wife. Essentially, now obviously you're not going to say, right, I need one wife. Appoint me a wife. That's not realistic. But essentially, that is the debt. His wife's been killed. So killed. I mean, she's been killed. This is what I was going to bring back to the manslaughter thing. The crime of manslaughter. The crime of killing. So why is it not just killed? Oh, you killed someone. Yeah, whether it's intentional or unintentional is by the by. If someone's died, they've been killed. There's a death, and I think that was even mentioned down here somewhere. I'll go back to. Where was it? I had it earlier on. I'm sure it's here. Kill, murder, homicide, assassination, slaying. So it's just kill or murder, but no, we've got to change it to manslaughter. And if you go to it must be under the dictionary definitions. So you got like homicide as another one. I think that's Greek. Homicide, malice. There's all kinds of ways of defining something, which is essentially you killed someone. Very simple. This is how you kind of spot the legal. And the introduction of new laws, including defining cycling. Alliston, now 20, so he's 20 years old now, from Bermondsey, South London, had denied both charges against him. He will begin his sentence in a young offender. This is what I don't understand. Why is a young offenders institution? Is that because of presumed mental health issues that they're kind of alluding to? In a statement outside court, Mr. Briggs says the case is clearly and evidently demonstrate the gap in law when it comes to dealing with death or serious injury by dangerous cycling. To have to rely on either manslaughter at one end and a Victorian law that doesn't even mention causing death on the other tells us that there is a gap. I agree with that. And I'm sure the legal society is looking at filling that gap with some lovely new statutes. Thank you. Thank you for requiring of more government, sir. The fact that what happened to Kim is rare is no reason not to be a remedy. Right. I'm pleased to say we have made good progress on updating the law, and now he's gone to bike retailers trying to say stop selling these bikes. See, he's acting right. He's trying to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else, which is, bringing out the best in you. because obviously he's going through. I mean, he's had a tragic loss, so he's now going out there to make sure that other people don't experience what he's experienced, which is what a man would do. So there we are. Maybe there is a man right there. Counsel. So Mr. Alliston's counsel. Mr. Weef, sorry, Alliston's counsel. That's the Cyclist counsel. Also addressed the media after doing so in a personal. See, they've personal capacity to back Mr. Briggs' campaign. So that's the defence counsel is backing him in order to bring about change to retailers selling these kind of buyers. And he said, I respectfully agree with Mr. Briggs in his dignified quest, that's a nice way of putting it, for that reform which he undertakes in the memory of his wife. Boom.
This has been an intensely grueling 10 days for me, my family, and our many friends. Obviously, I'm relieved that this trial is finally over, and I'd like to thank the jury for their verdict. I would like to ask the media to
So there was a jury. That's interesting.
Continue to respect my privacy, and for us to remember Kim, not through the lens of this trial, but for being the beautiful, fun-loving woman who adored her children and who lived her life to the full, and by the mantra, make every day count. Thank you.
I think it's a good time to end on those sentiments.